Uriah Noveck was born in Dvinsk. He was a scholar. These words from my cousin Judy were all I knew about my great-grandfather. In 2014, as I awaited the birth of my first grandchild, the next generation of Novecks, I wondered, what would I tell him or her about their ancestry? Who was Uriah? Where did he come from? How did he live? My mission? To boldly go in search of Uriah. Where to begin? I started with Cousin Judy's family tree, which she got from her mother. Uriah Noveck had 6 children. 4 of them, Sonia, Isidore, Morris, and Max, separately emigrated to America between the years of 1908 and 1922. Max, my grandfather, first moved to London, where in 1909, at the age of 24, he met and married a Polish woman, Katie Chanover. Their first child, Gertrude, Cousin Judy's mom, was born in London. After a few years, they came to America to rejoin the other Noveck brothers already in Brooklyn. Eventually, they had 3 more children, Bessie, Rose, and Saul, my dad. And here they are. Saul looks to be about 4 or 5 years old, and is he cute in his little sailor suit. Like most immigrants of the day, the Novecks were industrious. Max worked as a clothing presser in New York's garment district. Morris was a house painter. Isidore was a watchmaker. Sonia's husband Barney was an awning manufacturer and the wealthiest of the bunch. Max borrowed money from him to open his own restaurant at the old Brooklyn ferry terminal. Sadly, I never knew my grandfather Max. He died long before I was born. All I knew was that he owned a restaurant, died fairly young, and didn't go to synagogue, as Saul went with his mother. In fact, I am named after him, as we share the same Hebrew name, Meir Menachem Man. And based on what I've learned about him, I think we'd have a lot more in common. Looking at our younger photos, there's a definite familial resemblance. Like me, he was short, with piercing blue eyes. He was an entrepreneur and self-reliant. He didn't like going to temple, and he knew the value of a good suit. Here's looking at you, Grandpa. I decided to try to find out more about him. Like all immigrants of that era, he came through Ellis Island, so I went to their website, which has a searchable database. Looks simple, right? Just type in the name and press search. Not really. I've made it look simple here for you, but it took several hours of playing with the search engine criteria and scanning hundreds of names before I finally found my guy. And that's because he's listed as Max Novich. At least I had the clue he came from London, England. These folks were all from foreign countries, so Americanizing their names was pretty much a best guess translation. Max Novich. Next. If you click the link and scroll down, you can actually see the ship's manifest. And on line 5, we see that Max arrived on February 14, 1912, with $25 in his pocket. His destination? His brothers, the Messrs. Noveck, in Brooklyn, New York. He was 5'7", fair complexion, dark hair, gray eyes, and was born in Dvinsk, Russia. 4 months later, Kate and Gert followed, and it couldn't have been easy because it's noted that Kate was 5 months pregnant. And somewhere they lost the H. She's listed as Kate Noveck. I was naturally curious to find out how the name got changed to our unique spelling. So, back to the web. This would be too difficult to do on my own, and a search came up with Lawrence Harris, British Jewish genealogist. For a few £100, he found some interesting documents, including the marriage certificate of Max and Katie from the East London Synagogue in 1909. Only there, his name was spelled Marx Noveck. And in the 1911 census of England and Wales, here he is again, Marx. Wow, turns out Grandpa and I had a lot more in common than I thought. Spooky. What if his spirit is still here, inhabiting my body? What if I'm the reincarnation of my grandpa? Well, I doubt it. At least I've never woken up in the middle of the night speaking Russian. Yet. To follow his trail in America, I came up with Uproots, Professional Genealogy Research Services in New York. This Judy found some interesting documents. Here, Max's official certificate of arrival from Ellis Island with a big typo and correction. I guess this was before the invention of whiteout. And here, Max's petition for naturalization to become a citizen with the name properly spelled and his signature. I'll never know, but since the whole family has the same spelling, it could have started with one brother and then just gotten carried down the line. Oh no, my name could be the result of a typographical error. Just think, my whole life, my very identity, defined by a careless slip of the pen. Well, no sense screaming about it now. On a more solemn note, she also found Max's death certificate on July 19th, 1938, from cerebral thrombosis, a stroke caused by hypertension, back before we knew how to effectively treat it. So sad, he was only 54. But then, a shocking revelation. Another death certificate, in Brooklyn, October 8th, 1933, at the age of 74, died Uriah Noveck. He was born in Russia. His father's name was Max, and he's buried in the same cemetery as Grandpa Max. Could it be Uriah, the legendary scholar, was here in America? I had to find out. I emailed Cousin Judy out in Oregon, and she sent back this. The only known photo of Uriah Noveck, taken in 1932, he is flanked by his daughter Sonia and his daughter-in-law, my grandma Katie. Now that is a real Jew, kicking it old school, dark suit, big old-fashioned yarmulke, stern expression, big bushy beard, and that nose. Can't deny that nose. Sure glad I did not inherit that. I suspect he also had a history of stroke, as he has a prominent right facial droop. So Uriah came to America. I should be able to find him on the Ellis Island website. I was getting good at this, but it was not an easy task because he's listed as Uri Noveck. Uri? Seriously? At first I thought it was just another typographical error, but my Judy suggested it was in the Cyrillic conversion to English. Then I thought maybe it's the British spelling since he sailed from England. Turns out we were both right. Uriah's Hebrew name would be Uri in Russian. And here's the spelling in Cyrillic. That funky U symbol in Cyrillic equals U in English, but OU in French. British English keeps the original French spelling. Remember, these are the chaps who spell color with a U, recognize with an S, and esophagus with an O. And that, boys and girls, is how Uriah becomes Uri. Fortunately, it didn't stick, and the 1930 census shows he lived with Max and his family, including all my aunts and young Saul, age 9. What a shame. No one ever spoke of him, and as a kid I never thought to ask. And now none of these people are around anymore. So I am no closer to finding out where Uriah came from. But I do have one lead, and it would seem the first question would be, where the Finsk is Dvinsk? Well, turns out it doesn't exist, at least not on any modern map. To find out why, I'd have to hit the history books. Oh, those wacky Europeans. For centuries, it's been war and conquest, conquest and war. Little men fighting for little pieces of land, and the names change depending upon who's in charge. There's always been a city there. Under Polish rule, it was known as Dunaburg. When Tsar Peter the Great conquered the area for Russia, it was renamed Dvinsk. And in 1923, it became Daugavpils, part of the newly formed tiny republic of Latvia. Latvia? All I know about Latvia is it was the kingdom ruled by Dr. Doom in Marvel Comics. Oh, wait, that was Latveria. In that case, Latvia? I don't know anything about Latvia. How am I supposed to find Uriah when I can't even find his country on the map, or speak his language? Back to the web, where I found Baltic Gen, genealogical research in the Baltic region, and its founder, Alexander Feigmanis. Based in Riga, with degrees in history and theology, he speaks Latvian, English, Hebrew, Russian, German, and French. His references checked out, we exchanged emails, and he agreed to research the historical records for the Novecks of Dvinsk for the fee of $850, which didn't seem like that much, considering how far back he would have to search. And hey, you can't put a price on family. Meanwhile, I started wondering about the other half of my genes, the maternal side, the Ulanowskis, Grandpa Leon, Grandma Sarah Uden, and their children, my Uncle Sam, and the beautiful bride, my Mother Faye. What a babe! Saul didn't stand a chance. Meet Abe and Hannah Uden, my mother's grandparents. They had 3 daughters. Oi! Like Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. Bessie married Isidore Donchin, a direct descendant of some of the more influential rabbis in that era, although he was not one. They had several children, but I know nothing about them. Rebecca never married, and Sarah, my mother's mother, married Leon Ulanovsky from Elizabethgrad, Russia, now central Ukraine. Many thanks to my cousin Jan for these photos from the old country, taken around 1914. Although they died when I was quite young, I have fond memories of my bubby and papa. They must have come through Ellis Island also. I should be able to find them on the website. It took a little work and some creative spelling, but here they are. The ship's manifest shows Leon and Sarah, their young son Sam, her parents, and her sister Rebecca all arrived on November 8, 1922. The reason Bessie and Isidore were not with them, they were already here and sponsored their immigration. Sure enough, the Ulanovskys' origin, Elizabethgrad, Russia, just like my mother told me. But the Udens, to my surprise, Latvia, a town called Kreslava. A quick Google map search showed that it's located only about 20 miles from Daugavpils. Amazing! To think that my mother's mother's mother and my father's father's father were practically neighbors. How ironic. It's possible that my X chromosome and my Y chromosome might have even known each other over a century ago, but they had to travel 4,000 miles and wait 2 generations before they could get together and make me. So, another $850 to Alexander Feigmanis to research the Judens of Kreslava. I know you can't put a price on family, but I just doubled down on my bet, and I hope there's a payoff. Alex said it would take several months, so while I waited, I decided to research the Jews of Eastern Europe. Where did they come from? Why were so many concentrated there? And why did so many decide to leave for America? But I'm not going to those dusty old history books. Instead, I'm going to the source of all knowledge. Jews have had it rough for thousands of years. Enslaved, persecuted, cast out, exterminated.
When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Pressed so hard they could not stand. Let my people go. Yes.
These are all the times and places Jews have been expelled over the centuries. The list goes on and on and on, including the southern USA during the Civil War, when General Grant accused them of smuggling cotton from the south to the north. Although some of them probably were doing that. The order had to be rescinded by President Lincoln himself, and Grant had to apologize to run for president. But I digress.
Let my people go.
Going back to ancient times, first the Assyrians kicked us out of the Holy Land, but we returned. Then the Babylonians. Again, we returned. But then the Romans came and imposed harsh measures upon the Jews. The Jews rebelled, but the Romans prevailed and destroyed Jerusalem. After that, Jews either fled or were sold into slavery and scattered throughout the Roman Empire. And that was okay for 1,000 years or so, but as Jews grew in number and power, so did anti-Semitism. Jews were forced to convert or risk expulsion from an increasing number of European countries. If you follow the arrows, a lot of them seem to end up in this region. To find out why, I'd have to dig deeper. And boy, all this Jewish research is giving me a headache like you wouldn't believe. Oh, just kvetching. It's what we do. So, it all comes down to Lithuania and Poland. That story reminds me of an old TV show. It's the story of Lithuania, just a little duchy trying to find its way. They looked to the south, inspired their neighbor Poland. It was a nice kingdom. They decided to get together, 'cause they knew it would be better for their health. So the Lithuanian wed the Queen of Poland, and that's how they both became the Commonwealth. Yes, just like the Brady Bunch, the Lits and Poles got married and formed a blended family, but they did it for strength and defense against their powerful neighbors. Poland had a remarkable history of religious tolerance, and even since the Middle Ages, Jews were granted rights by royal decree. The Polish king welcomed Jews and even invited them to settle because of their skills and work ethic. The marriage lasted for 2 centuries, but unlike TV, there was no happy ending. In the late 1700s, Poland was overwhelmed and invaded by its rivals, and in a series of partitions lost its territory to Prussia, Austria, and Russia, and by 1794, Poland and Lithuania disappeared from the map. They didn't come back till after World War I. This was bad news for the 400,000 Jews, as they were now subjects of
the Russian Empire.
The dynasty of the Tsars was notably anti-Semitic, and Empress Catherine the Great was no exception. She may look like a benevolent ruler here, but she did not welcome the Jews and established the Pale of Settlement, basically a national ghetto on Russia's western border. Russian Jews were confined to this area by law. They were forbidden to live in large cities, and over the next century, hundreds of thousands of Jews were forcibly relocated to rural areas in the former Commonwealth as well as barren areas of the Ukraine. Most lived in poverty, their rights severely restricted, with limitations on access to agriculture, higher education, and learned professions. There were periodic pogroms, civilian riots, often with the military participating, where Jews were beaten or murdered, their property destroyed or confiscated. And mind you, this was even before the Nazis. Through my research, I discovered that many of them took place in Grandpa Leon's hometown of Elizabethgrad, this one in 1905. And this one in 1919, particularly brutal, where 1,000 people died in 2 days. Perhaps this is what made him finally decide to escape. I would too, given the chance, and so did over 2.25 million other Jews over the course of 48 years. They and my grandparents were the lucky ones. And I remember now my mother telling me he still had nightmares that the Russian army was coming to get him. So, after thousands of years of being enslaved, persecuted, cast out, and exterminated, and it's still going on to this day, you can't blame the Israelis for being a little bit militant. Okay, enough already with the history. What about Uriah? To my delight, Dr. Feigmanis came through. He scoured the digitized files of the 1897 Russian census, confirmed with my Google Translate, and found Uriah and his whole family, and Abe and Hama and their family. Alex translated the handwritten Russian documents and found Uriah and his wife Frida, and their children, using their Hebrew names, Meyer, Grandpa Max, named after Frida's father, as well as Isidore, Morris, Sonia, and the hitherto unknown Shlomo. I guess he never made it. And also, surprise, Uriah's mother, Gita Leah Urkova. Hello, great-great-grandma, who named Uriah after her father. Born in 1822, she spent her whole life in Dvinsk. Alex also sent back an exhaustive 12-page report where he researched the Novecks of Dvinsk and the Judens of Kreslava going back as far as 1852. The Latvian State Historical Archives, LSHA, list Kushel, son of Shlomo, and his 2 brothers, Manny and Berko, as well as his relative, Zalman, son of Movsha. In the 1975 list of male Jews of Dvinsk, we see them again. Sadly, Manny, or Manko, died, but he left behind his son, Herko, who can only be Uriah. Who knows, maybe his whole life was a typographical error also. Combining the Russian patronymic naming system with the Jewish tradition of passing down first names, I was able to come up with a Noveck family tree. There's Uriah, son of Manny, son of Shlomo. No siblings we know of, and his father died when he was young, but he has his uncles and lots of cousins. And then there's another group of Novecks, descendants of Movsha, which would beg the question, could these two guys be related, with a common ancestor born over 200 years ago in the late 1700s? Again, we'll never know, but based on the overlap of surnames, my guess would be yes. Imagine, great-great-great-great-grandpa Noveck. What a discovery that would be. But then, a shocking revelation. Uriah Noveck, patriarch, scholar, was a fish trader. I guess I expected to see rabbi or teacher or something. Maybe fish trader was his day job to pay the bills, but scholar was his true calling. At any rate, he was literate, as was his family. What about the Udins of Kreslava? Here they are, Abe and Chama, and their 3 daughters, Riva, Sarah, my bubby, and Pesca. And, surprise, surprise, 2 sons, Tevel, named after Chama's father, and Itzka. I never knew about these guys, but thanks to Cousin Jan, here's a picture of one of them. Too bad I'll never know which one. The label just said, Sarah's brother, 1914. But he was quite handsome and had great hair. Sure glad I inherited those genes. In another twist of fate, it turns out that Abe Udin was also a fisherman and merchant. I never knew the fish trade had such strong roots in my family. From now on, we'll have to greet each other by saying, May the fish be with you. Going back again to 1875, there were other Udin families living in Kreslava. There's Abe, son of Zuzka, age 21. There was a child named Zusia, hinting at a common relative, but there was not enough information to make a firm connection. However, since people didn't move around much in those days and Jews' movements were restricted, I think it's likely that they were all related. The Russian census records were so complete they had the street address of both Abe and Uriah. By comparing an archived map of Dvinsk with current-day Daugavpils, Alex was able to actually pinpoint the square block where Uriah lived. And at that moment, I knew what I had to do. I will go to Latvia and walk in the footsteps of my ancestors. Let's go.